Hello, welcome back to How to D&D. Today is all about the rules. And for those of you who are unaware, we do this weekly. This is a program that has been running for a little while now and will continue to run indefinitely as far as I know. You'll find that we'll be covering the basics to combat, the mechanics behind it. So if you were having trouble with the rules in any way, we're certainly going to do the best to help you, not just me, but also the chat. The chat will also help you out. They'll answer a lot of your questions as well. Okay. Now you can see that there are some maps, miniatures and dice out. I'm going to be coming back to this. I do a lot of demonstration on this channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my presentation first using slides. All of this is in 4K, by the way, live. And I'm going to then open it up to Q&A, questions and answers. I do want to focus far more on demonstration rather than on anything else. You know, I certainly will try to answer your questions, but I'm trying to focus more on actually demonstrating stuff and then certainly answering nuanced questions around the rules if need be. And hopefully I'm able to give you the correct answer or a suitable answer. Sometimes there isn't a correct answer. Just making sure that I've got everything working right. It looks like I have. I see we have Incus. Is it Incus? Look, if I got your name wrong, I do apologise. And we've got J Mums. How's it going? Hello. And Fender. Fender is a patron and also a moderator. Great to have you here. Okay, let's get straight into the business. So grab some food, some drink, and get comfortable, and let's rock on in to this presentation for today. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. No, I could be talking about the Avengers, but no, I'm not. This is the Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. This is lesson 2. This is the basics of combat, the mechanics of the game, how they work, explained and demonstrated to you, and hopefully in a way that you can understand. My overview for today, what I will cover, is the combat initiative, types of actions that you can take during your turn, and then weapon attacks, casting a spell, the dash action, the disengage action, the help action, the dodge action, searching, using an object, and then miscellaneous recommendations. Now, if there's something I have not mentioned in this overview for today, it's because I'm doing it later, okay? I can only deliver so much. There's a lot of rules in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I can only cover so much in one session. So the objectives is to explain everything as clearly as possible, demonstrate as much as possible, and allow you to participate as much as possible. So there's definitely going to be an aspect to that. I'm going to refer you to D&D Beyond, where you can get the basic rules for the game, for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It's free. You don't have to pay anything for it for the basic rules. So if you wanted to start playing this game, you don't have to spend any money. You just need to have access to the internet to be able to get access to the rules. You can also get a PDF of the basic rules. So if you wanted to print it out, you can. Now, the intention for today is to cover the core rules of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And the first thing we're going to start off with, because this is supposed to be around combat, is we'll start off with a thing you do almost always in the game, and that is combat initiative. So first off, normally the Dungeon Master will open a combat encounter, or a scene, as it's called, with a description of what is happening. What is the monster that is threatening the characters? Sometimes the Dungeon Master will open up with the combat scene because the characters have actually done something that has initiated the fight. You don't usually ask for initiative unless there's a trigger that caused that. Otherwise it gets very confusing. Once the scene is set, when the Dungeon Master says roll initiative, that's when you start rolling initiative. Initiative rolls are a special type of ability check. That is the result of adding your dexterity modifier to a 20-sided dice roll. All player characters and the monsters have to roll initiative, and they are placed in order of highest to lowest, with the highest initiative starting first in combat. Now, anyone surprised doesn't get to act or take a turn in the first round, but after that they can do whatever they like. They can take their turn as normal. And that's generally the process of doing your initiative. Now, what does it look like? As I said, you roll a 20-sided dice, you add your dexterity modifier, whether it's for the player character or for the monster, you add those two numbers together and you get your initiative check. Okay, that is what you put into order. Easiest way to understand all of this. There are types of actions in a turn. Now, whether it's for a monster or for a player character, it doesn't matter. It follows the same pattern as always. And that is, you have an action, a bonus action, a movement, and an interaction that you can take on your turn. You may also get a reaction on somebody else's turn, but you only get one reaction per round. And as a general rule, you only ever get one of these for an entire round. There are different specific situations where that might not apply, but generally you only ever get one of these per round. Your action is your main thing that your creature, your character, or your monster can do. There's a wide range of possibilities and options, including making an attack, casting a spell, or performing some sort of maneuver. The bonus action is a special type of action linked to either an ability check, okay, a skill check, a spell, or some other feature that states, and it's different from the main action. So when you see the word bonus action, that doesn't mean it's the same thing you can do as your action. Okay. Move is the creature's ability to change position around the battlefield by either walking, running, flying, crawling, swimming, or crawling and climbing. Interactions are an interesting thing. They're a quick thing that you can do, a task that you can perform as part of the creature's main action or as part of their movement. It might be tied to that in some way. Now, a good example of this would be something like drawing a weapon from your scarab before making an attack. That would be a good example. Or an interaction might be you pull out a potion before you use it to cast a spell, or you pull out a scroll to cast a spell. That would be probably a better example. There's another type of action, and it's probably one of the more confusing ones, and I totally understand if you are having struggle understanding it, and that's called the reaction. It's an instant response to a trigger of some kind, which can occur on your turn, the creature's turn who's going to perform the reaction, but it generally happens on somebody else's turn, which is why it's called a reaction. Reactions are something that you don't normally always get. It actually comes up very rarely. And a good example of this is the opportunity attack, when a creature moves out of your threatening range. If you have a melee weapon or a close quarter weapon, and as soon as you leave that space, there's an opportunity for the enemy to attack you as you move out of the space, because they threaten that space. And that's your reaction. Now, we've covered all the basic actions, but the thing you're probably going to wind up using in combat the most is obviously attacking, making an attack of some kind. And there are 4 different types of attacks that work slightly differently. There is your melee weapon attack. This is made at close quarters with either a sword, an axe, a mace, a spear. There are various other things you could use. A ranged weapon attack is made at short range or long range with bows, crossbows, a sling, or a gun, if you have guns in the game. A thrown weapon attack, okay, it's a little bit different. It's made at short range, and usually you would throw something like a dagger, a hand axe, a javelin, maybe a light hammer, or even a net. And then the last one, that is your unarmed strike. Okay, this is when you don't have a weapon in your hand at all. Okay, it is made at close quarter, where you would use either your fist, your feet, your elbows, your knee, your head, and so forth. Some part of your body. It's an unarmed strike of some kind. So that are all the different types of attacks that you have. But if you're into spell casting, you won't be doing a lot of that. You'll be doing something else. You'll be casting a spell. And there are different types of spells that you can cast. So the melee attack spell made at close quarters with an attack roll targeting the enemy's armor class. Okay, so that's the melee attack spell. And that would be a spell such as Booming Blade is a good example. Shocking Grasp, where you electrocute somebody. Inflict Wounds, where you have somebody basically starts to open up wounds all over them. Flame Blade and Spiritual Weapon. Now, Spiritual Weapon seems a bit strange but it is still a melee attack. Okay, it's just not originating from the spellcaster. It originates from the position where the Spiritual Weapon is currently residing. Ranged attack spells are made at close range and long range with an attack roll targeting the enemy's armor class. Now these could be spells such as Eldritch Blast, Ray of Frost, Firebolt, Guiding Bolt, and Chaos Bolt. They all do different types of energy damage generally, but they follow the same mechanics and rules. Then we have the melee saving throw spell. This is made at close quarters with a saving throw targeting the enemy, and I'm going to say, I would say Bestow Curse. Bestow Curse is probably the one that you're looking for with regard to a melee saving throw. Bestow Curse. Because that is actually done at close quarter and you actually have to make a saving throw. The next one would be the ranged saving throw spells. These are made at short range or at long range with a saving throw targeting the enemy. There are different things that they can target. There are 6 different types of saving throws in the game, but spells that would do something like this is Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Sacred Flame, and Toll the Dead. And then lastly, we have the automatic success spells. They don't require an attack roll or a saving throw, and they just work all the time, no matter what they engage in, okay? They don't have a dice mechanic tied to them specifically. So automatic success spells are something like Prestidigitation, which is like the Swiss Army knife of Dungeons and Dragons. You have Mage Hand, where you can manipulate something, and your spectral hand can move and shift stuff. Light, which creates light. Mending, which fixes something. Message, which sends a telepathic message. Magic Missile is actually an attack spell with no attack roll. It always hits. As long as you can see the target, you can hit it. And then you just roll damage. One of the more iconic spells in the game. And then Druidcraft, which is a kind of like the Druid's version of Prestidigitation, where you can do a lot of different things. So those are automatic success spells, right, where you don't have to worry about them succeeding or failing. They always work. Now that's the basics to your combat, but there are other actions you can take that are specified and codified in the game. So what are they and how do they work? Well, the first one I want to talk about is dash. Dash it requires your main action. It allows you to move your character or the creature or monster their speed, okay? Now, it's often referred to as extra movement. So on your turn, whether you're controlling a monster or a character, you get a move, which means you move whatever speed you have. If your speed is 30, you move 30 feet. And if you're using grid, that's probably 6 squares if every square is 5 feet. But if you've finished your move, but you still want to continue to change your position, you can do so, but you must spend your main action. So you use your action and you dash. And dash simply means that you get to move your speed again. You're not doubling it. So if you have a speed of 30 feet, you don't double it. You just move 30 feet again. So that's how dash works. And it's useful, particularly if you want to cross the battlefield quickly and engage the enemy at close quarters. Now, what if you're in a fight and you need to get out? You're in trouble. Disengage. Disengage is there for a reason. It requires that you use your main action in conjunction with your movement. So a character or a monster doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity. So as you move out of the melee threatening range of a monster or another character, you'll wind up getting attacked, okay, as long as they can see you, okay, and as long as you fulfill the requirements of provoking attacks of opportunity. So when you move away from the threatened creature. But if you take this action and then you move, your entire speed that you move, you do not provoke attacks of opportunity. What this allows you to do is to get out of trouble, out of the front line if you need to, if you're taking too much damage, or to move around the front line to the back line and attack the back line, because you can do that. It works as long as you use the disengage action at the beginning before you start moving. It applies to the entire movement phase. Okay, so you're all good. Now, what if the idea of disengaging is not really what I'm after? What I really need to do is I need to do some Matrix style dodging, because I don't want to get hit, and I think I'm going to get hit and hurt real bad. We take the dodge action, and this uses your main action for either your character or your monster. It makes it more difficult to hit you with an attack, and that means that all the enemies have disadvantage on attack rolls against you for the entire round. Not just your turn, but their turn as well. So that's quite useful. That means that you have an entire round where you don't have to worry about them being able to just roll one dice to determine success on their attack. They have to roll 2 dice and take the lowest result, which is great for you. It also grants you advantage on a dexterity saving throw if you have to make a dexterity saving throw, because somebody's throwing fireballs at you. Now, it can't always be about just you in combat, right? Sometimes people need help, and there is a help action where you can actually assist somebody in the middle of a battle or combat. This is going to use up your main action for your character or your monster, and you can aid another creature's completion of a task by granting them advantage on the next ability check. Now, this might be a skill check in the middle of combat that they have to perform, and they're having trouble performing it, and so you give them advantage, so they roll 2 dice instead, take the highest result. Or you're going to use the help action to distract the enemy, and that means they get advantage on their attack roll. That means that there's a greater chance of them succeeding on the attack by allowing them to have advantage. Now, there's a good time to use the help action in battle when it comes to attack rolls, is when your attacks, if they were to hit, would really have no significant effect. So what would we do? We make it possible for somebody who can be effective at attacking to actually get to have advantage, because advantage means we take 2 dice rolls, okay, and take the highest result off those 2 d20 dice rolls. So that's the help action. Sometimes we have to find stuff, and usually we do that outside of combat, but we can also do it inside of combat, and it's called the search action. It requires your main action again. That would apply to either your character or the monster, and it can detect something or find someone or something that is hidden or hard to notice. And what we would do when we do this is we make a perception check or a wisdom check, or either an intelligence investigation check. It might be one of these. It depends on what the Dungeon Master thinks is appropriate given the situation. Up to you, Dungeon Masters, to decide which one is appropriate given the circumstance. Now, what I will say about the search action is it has its place, but it is often not a particularly good action to take, primarily because you give up your main action, and your main action is usually required to cast a spell and make an attack. And you really have to be very sure about doing something like this, because even if you are trying to search for an invisible creature or something that you can't see, or you don't know where the location of them is, if you do actually succeed on your search check, you still can't target that location, and there's time for them to change position before you get to act. So the search action in combat is probably not a wise thing to do. There are circumstances where it is appropriate and a good idea, but generally it's not terribly useful to you. But that's how it works. Now, we have the interaction. Like, this is where we can do something small, but use an object is another way of doing something that is extending the interaction concept. Use an object in combat requires you use your main action for your character or your monster, and you are manipulating an object or the environment if the interaction has already been used during your turn. Okay, you get one interaction free. But if you want to try to perform 2 interactions, or something that's classified as 2 interactions, the second one will have to be a use an object, which means you burn up your main action. There are also circumstances where use an object is far more appropriate than an interaction, because the task being performed requires too much effort or too much time, and therefore it has to use your main action. This is determined by your Dungeon Master. They will let you know. Some of the rules available for 5e do spell it out and are very specific, but often this is something that is a Dungeon Master call. So, why would we use an object? Well, we need to pull a lever, and we've already drawn our weapon on our turn. So we draw our weapon, we make an attack, maybe we then have to pull a lever that's on the wall. And so there's too many things going on, so we will have to give up making that attack. Yeah, we can draw our weapon, we can move, and we can pull the lever. That's what we'll be able to do. So you have to be very sure about when you're going to use an object. If it's not important enough, then you won't use it. Now, something like drinking a potion of healing, specifically drinking a potion of healing, not drinking ale. Apparently, drinking ale is only an interaction. You're all good. So if you drink a cup of ale, you're all good. Interaction, it's free. You can do that. But no matter what, every time you use a potion of healing, you draw it out of your pack and you drink it, that uses up your main action. Okay? All right. So that covers the basics of combat. Now, I always give out miscellaneous recommendations when I'm doing something like this, and I'm going to give them out again to you, okay? When you're unsure what to apply to the combat situation in terms of dice mechanics, you want to either use an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, or a saving throw to determine if whatever is being performed will work. So whatever task or action that is being done, it will fall under ability check, skill check, attack roll, saving throw. So Dungeon Masters, let the Dungeon Master make that call. I have explained how each one of these works in previous videos or live streams. So what you can do is you can go back and refer to them if you need to. But those are your 4 key dice mechanics, and they all follow the same principle. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you think that actually dice don't apply, but the action, you still want the players or the monsters to perform the action, there might be a circumstance where you allow for automatic success. Why would you allow automatic success? Say somebody decides that they're going to climb down a rope, and climbing down a rope is an easy or very easy task. So why would we worry about rolling dice? Okay? So you might just say, yes, you can do that. You can use your movement up to climb down the rope. I'm going to make that difficult terrain because you are climbing, so you can't move 30 feet. You can move 15 feet down the rope. Sweet. Good. But there's no dice roll involved. You only want to involve a dice roll when it's actually important to do so, okay, where failure is important. Or maybe you decide that whatever the task is that's being performed is simply far too difficult to achieve. And so automatic failure should be applied based on making it sense. If it makes sense, then do it. If the players say to you, look, I would like to convince the king to pull down his pants in the middle of a battle and then moon everybody and then throw his crown into the crowd and declare that he has decided to no longer be king and he is going to take up the duties of a priest or a monk in a monastery. By all means, tell the player or whoever's doing this, no, that's going to fail, and there is no dice roll involved. If it doesn't make sense, then use automatic success and automatic failure. Okay, you do not have to have player characters or even monsters rolling for every single thing if it does not make sense. And that covers pretty much everything I wanted to do today, but there are some basics that I need to discuss with you, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. So give me your feedback with regard to your questions. Use the comment section for your questions. Give me any feedback that you have on this presentation that would be useful to me. Okay, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. I'm not gone. Just bear with me. I've been talking for a little while, so I'm going to just go back to the chat and see how we're going. I will be coming back to my face in a second. So I'm going to go through chat fairly quickly, and then I want to get on to dealing with actual questions and answers, because I know I'm aware that I probably have not been covering enough of that, and I want to do more of it rather than less of it. Why can't I find my tools? Okay, so we'll come back to the screen in a second. Let me just go back to my head cam and answer some questions in the chat before we get into the demonstration aspect. If there are things you want me to demonstrate, please let me know in the chat. If you are not subscribed to the channel, you need to be subscribed for at least 20 minutes to be able to comment. I would like you to be able to comment, so please subscribe if you haven't. That will make it so much easier for me and for everybody else. Okay, and I'm going to open up this. Is this going to work? Just give me a second while my phone catches up, because I'm at some point I'm going to have to move from my phone to this thing, and I just want to make sure this is all working before we get started. We have more than an hour and a half to cover as many things as possible. Demo, please. Absolutely, we're going to demo. No, let's go through the chat so I can see it clearly. Let's have a look at our poll. Are you new to Dungeons & Dragons 5e? Yes, 32% out of 19 votes. Okay, so that's a lot of people who probably need some help, or at least may need some help. No, 63%, not sure, 5%. I kind of figured some people weren't sure where to place themselves. And just watching, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, good. Cool. So we've got Jay Mums, how's it going? I said hi to you before. We have Fender. Fender is a patron, been on Patreon for a little while. He's also a moderator, and thank you for joining us today. Seeker also supports the channel in other ways, which I won't go into. And we've got Toto Sauron. Hello, how are you? Nor Oak, I think I got it right this time. Nor Oak is also a patron, just joined recently. Thank you for coming. And who else? Spirit Wolf. Hello, Spirit Wolf. How are you? Now, this is going to be... What is TBH? I don't know what TBH is. To be honest? Is that what... To be honest. Okay, all right. So that's what you're talking about. How's it going, Dungeons and Chronics? Samuel von Brewer. Now, Samuel... I'm pretty sure you've been a patron for quite a while, and you know, your name, your username threw me completely, because when I saw it, I was like, is that the same Samuel Brewer that's on Patreon? Because you've got the Von in there. And so I was like, okay, it's time to make him a patron. He's been a patron for a while. It's time to make him a moderator as well. And I was like, oh God, I hope I've picked the right person. So Samuel, you'll let me know if you're not the right Samuel, but I'm pretty sure you're the one who's been on Patreon for quite a while. Yes, it is. Look, there's a reason why people support this. This is supposed to be for new players, even if you're a new dungeon master and you are struggling with the rules and you need some assistance around this sort of thing. So it's not just about explaining stuff. We will actually demonstrate, okay? I will do some initiative. We'll do a lot of the mechanics we've discussed today. Yeah, bonus action is something that needs to go. Bonus action is just a problem. I think it needs to be called something else. Frankly, I don't think we need the bonus action. I think the bonus action could go completely and we just have action. Parry as a reaction. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, just because there's just too much going on. If everybody had parry, might be a problem. But you already knew that. Okay. I think we've got everything. Right, let's get on with demo stuff, right? That's what you're here for. Let's start actually showing you some different things. So back to my screen, and I can see the chat from my phone. Park D, how are you doing? The basic information I'm covering, but I guess I'm going to try to do nuance today. And I don't know that I'll necessarily do nuance well, but we'll try. Now, I was tempted to do initiative first, because I often start open up with initiative and then we go into the other things. But I'm going to do this backwards today. Okay? So for those of you who are like, what the heck, Fred, are you talking about? Don't take it away, Fred. Don't take it away. I'm taking it away. Don't freak out. It'll come back. So no crying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate with my maps and miniatures, because I kind of like doing it that way. I'm going to demonstrate some of these different mechanics that I've been talking about. And probably the first one is use an object. And let's give you some examples of what use an object would be like. Now, there's not going to be any dice rolling revolved around this use an object thing because I don't want to do that necessarily, although I can if you really want. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a situation. Let's imagine we have a scene here taking place. Initiative has already been rolled, and it's now time to take your turn. So what are you going to do? Say it comes round to our fighter here. Okay, I've got a fighter with an axe, and they decide, well, actually, what I would like to do is I would like to throw a javelin over here at these, say the orc, or the ogre. I want to throw a javelin at the ogre. That would be your action, correct? Yeah. And then after that, what I want to do is I want to move over to this tower, and I want to try to use my weight and charge into it and knock it over as well. And I'm thinking, well, that's my action, main action to do that, and then charge over here, and that will use my movement. And then I've still got an interaction or a bonus action, and I could push over the tower, but it doesn't work that way. Okay, so I can throw the javelin, and I can move over here and charge 5, 10, 15, but if I want to try to charge into the tower and use my strength to knock it over, use an object essentially, or use part of the environment, it's going to require probably a lot more. So I'm going to have to give up that throw the javelin concept at the ogre and just move and then push against this tower. That would be use an object. Okay, if my fighter decided they wanted to pull a potion of healing out because they've already been hurt by arrow fire, that is going to be use an object. I have to use my main action. I won't get to cast a spell or make an attack. Okay. Now, we're going to forget about something like action surge. Fighters have action surge at a certain point, but we're going to forget about that. Okay, that's a special thing. What about, okay, given that sort of situation, are there other things that I can do in this circumstance? All right, so maybe what I want to do this time is I'm going to have my fighter walk over here, and I've decided I want to walk over here. I want to, and I've used 10 feet, okay, 5, 10. Each square is 5 feet. I'm going to throw a javelin, that's my main action, and then I want to move behind this cover, this broken down section of building, and I want to use an interaction to pull a tile off the building. Who knows why you want to pull a tile off the building? I'm just suggesting maybe that's what you want to do. Does a dungeon master classify that as an interaction, okay, which is free, or do we classify it as something like a main action where we're use an object? Okay, so again, a lot of these things are kind of difficult to figure out straight away. So you as the dungeon master have to decide if the time taken and effort required is going to mean you have to change it. So it's always good is if you've got players, you're playing the game, tell the dungeon master everything you want to do before you start doing it. So you don't have to take everything back and retro look at everything that's taken place. Hello, Paul, how are you? 8 players, so to save time on initiative, we roll once at the start of the session. Yes, we'll talk more about that. Rolling initiative, we'll get back to it. Okay. So if I decided, okay, pulling the tiles off the building is actually going to be use an object, which is going to use up the main action, then I'm going to have to tell my player, no, you can't have thrown that javelin. So this is why I say it's very, very important to tell the dungeon master everything that you want to try to do in your one turn so they can figure out what is going to be appropriate given the situation. Now, let's go back to our situation where we're trying to push over the tower. Like, we want to charge into the tower. It's going to be, okay, you want to do that. You're not going to be able to make an attack, but you can charge into the tower and try and push it over. All right, so I'm going to do that. 5, 10, 15, and what do I do? Well, I'm going to let you make an athletics or an acrobatics check. Either one, it doesn't really matter. So, athletics. Athletics. Can he spell? So what would that look like? Well, let's get rid of this. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, hang on. Fred, didn't you say that there are some situations and some tasks that are like way too hard? Well, yes, you could, in this situation, you might decide as a dungeon master, well, yes, you can do this, but it's going to be at disadvantage. You roll 2 dice, you take the lowest result. Or you might say, no, I won't apply disadvantage to the roll. That's fine. You can attempt it, okay? And I have a DC in mind, whatever that DC is, and then we'll work with that. Now, there's lots of different ways you could do this. You could go, okay, so that means I'm going to get whatever my modifier is for the fighter in terms of athletics. Let me just see if I can find it. I'm going to use the pre-made character sheet at level 1 from the Dungeons & Dragons 5e starter set. This has got the Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is the Noble, and their athletics is a 5. So 5 plus a d20. So if I decide I'm going to use disadvantage, I'm saying it's possible, it can be done. Okay, what's our check going to be looking like? I'm going to say it's a 25. You've got to get 25. This isn't just medium difficulty or hard. This is very hard to do, all right? So I could roll this, take the lowest result. I rolled a 20 and a 14, so I take the 14. Well, the DC was really, really difficult, and I didn't succeed. I needed to get 25. 25 is a hard check to make. So you could have role-played it and adjudicated it that way. Now, for those of you who think, well, hang on, applying disadvantage just seems unreasonable. Like, that wouldn't work. Use an object, doesn't make any sense. I mean, one person couldn't possibly achieve this. So here's another suggestion I have for you. And that is, in older versions of the game, we used a different mechanic. And that is, and you can combine this with a help action and use an object. This gets complicated, people. And that is, we would stack the score that you had with somebody else's score, because multiple people were going to take place. If the fighter says, I'm going to charge into the tower and try and knock it over so we can take out these troops on top, and the rest of you come with me, and so you're hoping that the other people who are playing the game are going to follow suit and do the same sort of thing. Now, it might not make much sense for a rogue to do so, but a little bit of extra help might do the job. You might find that your dwarf is actually reasonably strong. So what you might say is like, okay, I'm going to take your score. Now, you could, in the past, what they did, when it related to anything that involves strength, and you can do this with other skills and other abilities as well, by the way, is they take that score. So what is the score for our fighter? It's got a 16 for their strength. So although we're talking about athletics, let's forget about the athletic skill. Let's go, you got a 16. I'm not going to involve a dice roll, but you've got to get 25 in total. Well, that's not going to work. You're going to need somebody else to assist you to make that work. So it rolls round, and it's now the dwarf's turn to come into play. And they said, okay, I will help you. So I'm going to move 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I move my full distance, and I'm going to use my shoulder and barge into it and try to help you knock over the tower. Okay, well, let's have a look. How would that work? Well, we don't have to roll any dice. Now, this is an old dice mechanic, people. It's not part of 5e, but I'm suggesting there are lots of different ways of doing this. Okay, it's up to you as a dungeon master. So what is the strength of our not the strength modifier, but the actual strength score itself? It's a static 14 for our cleric dwarf. So we'll take the 14 from the cleric and apply that. Now, if we add them up, that is 20 what? 20, 30. 30 is more than 25. Now, the first blow to try to knock over the tower didn't work with our fighter, but the second blow with the added weight and strength of the cleric is successful. We have now pushed over using an object, and you might say in many ways it's like using the help action, but actually it's both using the object, both engaged in the same task, increase their chances. They are successful. This is a very old mechanic, people, okay? And I'm putting it out there for you because you can do it with many different things. Sometimes dice rolling isn't the way to go. Now, for those of you who are thinking, Fred, that's way too, retro for me, and I need something that makes far more sense. There's got to be a better way. Sure, we can do it a different way. Let's get rid of this. So let's go back to where we were. And our fighter decides that, in this case, look, I want to try and charge the tower. and try and knock it over. Sure, you can do that. Moving across, but the cleric or one of the others say, look, I also want to help them, but I don't take my turn until after they take their turn. And so as a dungeon master, what you can do is say, okay, fighter, you can move and start the initial process of trying to push the tower over. But I'm not going to get you to make a check yet. Then it rolls around and the cleric takes their turn. I'm going to move up now and help the fighter make this tower fall over. Okay, I'm going to use an object, try and push over the tower. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. All right, who has got the best modifier in terms of athletics? Well, the best modifier is actually the fighter in this case, right? You normally think that the fighter would have the better athletics check, and they do. They have a 5. So let's take that 5. And because they're using an object, and this character here is actually using the help action, well, we roll with advantage now, don't we? Now the Dungeon Master says, now, fighter, you can roll your athletics check. So you roll 2 dice, you take the highest result. That means they get the 20 rather than the 14 now. So 20 and 5 equals 25. And remember, I had set the DC as being very hard. They are successful. And the tower goes down. So there's another way of doing it. There's lots of different ways of incorporating, use an object into your environment during a battle, and also different ways of adjudicating it. It's just what you think is going to work for you. Now, there's plenty of stuff in the rules that say you do it a particular way. And I would just suggest to you that they can't cover everything and view them more as suggestions. Do it the way you think makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Hopefully it does. Okay, so I've kind of demonstrated that particular action. So let's just take this all back here. And now there's another thing. Now I kind of demonstrated the help action, didn't I? But let's demonstrate the help action again. So let me just write on here, help. Help. Now, if you remember, when you do the help action, you give advantage to somebody else for whatever they're doing. Now, probably the most common thing that we want to try and get advantage on is an attack, correct? We want to make some sort of attack, so we want to get advantage on that. So what if we want to decide, okay, look, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this up a little bit. I'm going to move these little fellas up. They're getting closer now. They're getting closer. And we're like, okay, the ogre's getting close. What should we do? Well, the fighter takes their turn if it's their turn to go first. And it says, okay, I'm going to go and engage the ogre. Okay, and I'm going to make an attack against them. Well, that's fine. You can do that. They make the attack. Maybe they hit, maybe they don't. And then it rolls around and it's somebody else's turn. And this is an opportunity for who else is with you to actually assist that fighter making that attack. Maybe you find that your fighter is actually pretty good at that sort of thing. So how would I do that? Well, you could go, if it's the cleric moving up, you go 5, 10, 15, 20. You move up using your move, and you say, okay, it's my turn. I'm going to take the help action. So I'm going to assist the fighter. Now, under the current rules, it doesn't actually say that you can state who you're assisting. It just means that when you do the help action, the first ally to make an attack against this creature gets advantage, which is generally to your what you want to have happen. But if you're trying to do it because there's somebody particularly in your party that's got a better chance of doing a lot more damage, then maybe you want them to have advantage. Now, a good example of this would be what happens if the cleric doesn't go first. It's actually the rogue moves up and they attack and they get their sneak attack because there's somebody within 5 feet of the enemy. And that's always good, right? If you can get your sneak attack damage in, great. But what if the cleric moves up and they say, on their turn, I want to take the help action and give advantage to my allies. And what you're really wanting to do is give advantage to the person who's got the sneak attack, the rogue. You don't really want the fighter to have the advantage, even though they have a big axe. You decided it'd actually be more beneficial in this case, maybe, to actually have the rogue have advantage. So what does that look like? Whether it be the fighter or the rogue who's going to get advantage, how does that look? Well, it's pretty simple, okay? I'm going to take the fighter first. So they have a great, oh, where's that? That's not the right one. Where is it? We'll do the rogue first because I've got it closer by. Okay, so we're going to use our short sword. And we're also going to need some damage dice. So we're going to need, for our short sword, we're going to also need a d6. And we're also going to be doing sneak attack. So we need another 6-sided dice because we're hopefully going to have all the prerequisites required. So to get your sneak attack damage from your rogue, you need to have advantage on the attack or an ally within 5 feet. Okay, all right. Or the enemy has to have an enemy within 5 feet, which is confusing as hell. I am totally aware of that. So our first task is to make an attack roll, which is going to be 5 plus whatever we roll. And then we'll also be doing damage, which is 3 plus the dice that we have. Okay, imagine this character's level 1. Okay, rogue is level 1. So cleric applied help action. We get advantage on our attack roll. Rogue rolls. Okay, I rolled a 5 and a 6. The 6 is the highest number. We take the highest number. We get a total of 11. You compare that with the armor class of your ogre. Okay, and if it were to hit, which it probably won't in this situation, so we'll roll those again. I don't think the armor class of an ogre is actually 11. I think it's close, but it ain't that bad. So we'll just do another roll. Okay. That's a better example. Advantage, help action, take 13 rather than the 2 because I rolled a 2 and a 13. Oops, get rid of the 6 here. 13. And that is 18. 18 would be more than enough to hit the armor class of an ogre. Okay, equal to or greater than, that's what we get. So now we roll our damage. So we roll our damage for our short sword and we also roll our damage for our sneak attack. Okay, we can roll them together and we add them up. 4 and 5 comes to a grand total of 12. So we did 12 damage on the ogre. And that's how you would apply something like the help action as in a combat situation. Let me just have a look. I can see people typing stuff into the chat. I don't know if that's directed to me or not, but we'll see. So let me just quickly have a look. While I'm looking through, I'm going to rub this out and we're going to move on to something else. Something that people don't use a lot, and that is the dodge action. Okay. Dodge. The dodge action. Here we go. Yes, if a character has proficiency with this. Yes, so Paul, you're right. A character who is proficient with masonry tools, if it is made out of masonry, if it's a carpenter, or have carpenter's tool proficiency, and it's made out of wood, probably more appropriate. You could probably use that to find a weak spot. Now, what does that do? Does that mean you give advantage to the person who's making the check, or do you increase the chance of success, or are you going to do something else? Are you going to lower the DC? Maybe you decide that I'm going to reduce the DC by 5 because they are able to figure out the weakest points in the tower. So going back to that. Shatter, yes. But I'm trying as always, Paul, to demonstrate the mechanics that we're talking about today. Okay, so dodge. How does dodge work, and when is a good time to use dodge? Well, given this situation, dodge is probably a really bad time to employ it. Why is that? Because ultimately our situation is we're out in the open. There's no bottle point for dodge. Dodge works really well if you can funnel the enemy into one location. Yep. But there are times when dodge would be very appropriate to employ. And when would be an appropriate time to employ dodge? Well, if, say, our rogue is here and our cleric is here and suddenly our fighter is being swarmed by goblins. This is probably a bad situation to be in. And it can happen. Like fighters get surrounded by enemies all the time. And say we have a bugbear down here, and maybe we'll put our ogre over here as well. So the fighter is in a bad spot. Do you really want to be making attacks now? Is this the best time, or is the best option is just to stay alive and let them and hopefully soak up all of these attacks that will hopefully miss? Because I could take the dodge action. If I take the dodge action, it means that the goblins, the bugbear, and the ogre will all get disadvantage on their attacks. So what is that going to look like? Let's have a look and just see how that might turn out given our situation. Yeah. So I've got the stat block for a goblin. They can make a scimitar attack or a short bow attack, and it's a +4 to hit and does some damage. Now I'm not going to worry about doing the damage. All I'm going to do is look at what happens if we suddenly have disadvantage, okay, because your fighter is dodging. So that's there 4. It's not a high number. There are a lot of goblins making dice rolls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 goblins would be making dice rolls. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Okay, I'll put that there for now. That'll keep that out of the way. Right, so let's start off with our goblins. We're going to roll. I've only got 2 20-sided dice, so I'm going to do this, have to roll the dice a few times. So these first 2, we'll roll these, and let's see what we get. Oh, so the first one, rolling with disadvantage, would have been a 14, but because of disadvantage, got 5. 5, well, that ain't going to do very much. 9 is not enough to get the armor class of our fighter, who's got a 17. Okay. Next one here, disadvantage because it's taking the dodge action, and you get. All right, so this time not as great as I would have hoped. Got a 16, so that's 20. I probably will hit the fighter, but that's only 1 attack that's got through out of 2. Let's see if it still works out for us though. Next one here, goblin, disadvantage, dodging. If I'm still alive, I may not be, but if I'm still alive. So we got a 3 and a 6. We take the 3, the lowest result of the two dice because of the disadvantage. Okay, 3 comes to a 7. Well, 7 is not enough to hit that fighter. So he's still alive. Okay, number 4 goblin. Let's roll that one. I got a 10 and I got a 12. So we take the lowest result because I've got disadvantage. So that's 10. And I add the 4 for the modifier, which comes to 14. Well, 14 is not enough. Still fails to hit the fighter. Out of 4 attacks, only 1 has got through. Okay, the 5th one from the goblin. Okay, look, we got an 8 and 8, so we take the 8. Because they're rolling with disadvantage, you're taking the dodge action fighter. 8 and 4 is 12. Still fails. So out of all of the 5 goblin attacks, only 1 got through. And we'll do, frankly, a piddly amount of damage, because you're going to be rolling a 6-sided dice for the short sword, and you'll be adding about 2 to that. So on average, it's going to do what? 5 points of damage on average. Okay, what about if we bring in the bugbear? Let's have a look and see what the bugbear does. All right, so I'm going to rub out these. It's a different number for the bugbear. Only 1 of these attacks have got through so far, remember? Only 1 of those attacks have got through. And on average, it's probably done, say, 5 points of damage on our fighter. Okay, right. Our bugbear probably is going to use the Morning Star. Now, the problem with a Morning Star and a bugbear is they do a lot of damage. We're not going to say that this is a surprise. What we will say is they're still going to get their benefit because they're brutal, okay? When they make a melee weapon attack, they get an extra 1. So they're going to wind up getting 2d8 if they hit. And the modifier to hit is only a 4 with the Morning Star. It's only a 4. So rolling with disadvantage, still dodging, trying to get out of the way, not get hit. We roll. Okay, so I got an 11 and I got a 6. So we take the 6, the lowest number. We got a 10. 10 from the bugbear. The bugbear misses. Didn't succeed, does not do the damage. Well, that's good news. This is where it gets tricky now. The big one. The one that can really do a lot of damage to us, really hurt us a lot. That ogre. That ogre could really be the difference between staying alive and not staying alive, correct? And so that's why we want to dodge. For the life of me, I don't even remember what the ogre's attack bonus is, but let me just have a look very quickly. I'll have to make sure that I have it accessible a bit more next time. Ogres. Here we go. So it's a 6. So we've got a great club and does a lot of damage, just like the bugbear. So a 6 on our attack. A 6 on the attack. So let's rub that out. Put 6. The ogre's turn. The ogre also has disadvantage because we're dodging. Roll it. We got an 18 and we got an 11. Okay, so the 11 is the one we take. 17 is our total. So in this situation, the ogre does hit us. But you can see just how many attacks got through out of all the attacks that were made. This situation could have been far worse. It probably is going to be quite bad because the ogre is about to do quite a bit of damage. There are benefits to using dodge. If you are surrounded, if you're in a bottle point or a bottleneck point where you're only going to get 1 or 2 attacks on you because only 1 or 2 or 3 individuals can attack you at a time, it's probably a good place to position yourself. So dodge has its place in the battle. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate disengage. I haven't seen any questions coming up in chat that sort of highlight I need to cover something differently. So you let me know if I do, and I will. Disengage. Let's have a look at disengage and how that looks. Disengage. All right, that's disengage. This is what this is all about today, is disengaging. Let's change our situation here a little bit. Let's maneuver our fighters into a different position. So that instead of them being surrounded by multiple enemies and probably being pummeled to death, we're going to bring in the front line and we're going to have our wizard back here casting spells. We've got our ogre here fighting. We've got a goblin here and here, and put a goblin here and a goblin here. So right now, our front line consists of 3 individuals. The fighter, the cleric, and, of course, our rogue. Now, oops, is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. Did I want to? Yes, I wanted to have that one over there. We'll put that one there. Was that the right one I wanted to do? I can't remember. I think that's right. Yeah, that's right. I'm organising it this way. So we've got our leader here. This is our leading goblin. Our leading goblin is trouble, right? Leading goblins can do all sorts of horrible things to us. These guys are in the tower. Don't need to worry about them, okay? In the tower, they're in the tower. Don't worry about them. Okay. So what about if we want to disengage? 1, to escape the battle and let somebody else hold the front line, or 2, to get around the back, around the front line to the back line and attack the back line. And sometimes there's a good time to do that. And you could have your rogue take the disengage action on their turn as part of their movement. Disengage, move, 5, 10. Yeah. Now, at this point, the ogre should have been able to attack, but I'm disengaging, so it doesn't get to. 10, 15, 20. I've now got to the back, and I was going after the leader. I want to take out the leader, hoping that everybody else will run away. Yep, given our situation. This is often when we'll use disengage. It's not being used to escape, it's being used to change position and go after more vulnerable targets, if we can. Another time where disengage might be appropriate and really useful, and certainly something you want to consider, is not necessarily to move around the back, but to, let me just move this back into position here. Disengage can be also really useful if all we want to do is change position for whatever reason. Now, why would we want to change position? Well, what if you're using something like the flanking rules? So right now, the rogue has got sneak attack, yes, because there's an ally within 5 feet, okay, of this ogre. But what they really want is they want to have advantage Because if they get advantage, they get to roll 2 dice, better chance of striking. Okay. And when you're a rogue, at a certain point, you can disengage as a bonus action, right? You can do that, right? So what would be a good idea? Well, I am thinking I've got flanking rules being used by the Dungeon Master or our players. I want to get around here so I can flank with the fighter. So I move, disengage, bonus action, as long as I'm at least level 2 and have cunning action. 5, 10, 15, and where is it? 20. 20. There we go. I'm now flanking with the fighter. Okay, and that means I get advantage if we're using flanking rules. So there's another time when actually something like the disengage action works really well if you're using flanking rules. It is an optional rule. It's not something you necessarily use for sure, but at another time when it would actually come into play quite often. Okay, it is now that halfway point, and I need to take a short break, but I will be back. So I'm going to put down ask your questions, hashtag ask your questions. There we go. I put it in. We'll get Arnold to look after you for a little while, about 5 minutes or less, and then I'll be back and we'll continue along this trail. Okay. All right, let me just position myself here, and we will... oh, looks like there's a lot of stuff going on here. We will definitely come back and start dealing with some further things that you guys have mentioned here. There's one more thing I would like to demonstrate before we finish, though. I'm going to start dealing with your questions, and I'll be quick. And that's the dash action. Dash. Okay, so dash. Don't have to roll dice for dash. Dash just works. Yep. So when's the right time to use dash? Good question. Like, let's deal with that, shall we? And where is our rogue? Put our rogue over here. Put our cleric over here. Fighter there, something like that. And we've got some goblins all the way back here. Set up the defensive line. Okay. Okay, and then we've got an ogre over here. So, when is a good time to use the dash action? Well, the dash action, as I said, uses your main action. So if I was in a situation like this and I was the fighter and I've got this great axe that I want to swing and do as much damage as possible, I don't really want to be mucking around with javelins or stuff like that. I just want to get in close and start smacking things as quickly as possible. But I also want to keep the enemy off everybody else. If I'm able to do so, great. This is a time when you may want to cross the battlefield more quickly. And so what you do is you take your move. This fighter moves 30 feet, so that's 6 squares. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. But I'm still not in range to actually use my axe. I could decide to use my javelin, but I don't want to use my javelin. I want to use my axe. So what do? I still have an action left. I have an interaction. The interaction won't help me. The bonus action won't help me. But I can use my action to dash. So I can dash again. I'll dash now and use my speed or movement again. So we go 5, 10. I'm now engaged. So all I was trying to do was get up close as quickly as possible to keep this enemy away from the rest of the party. And if you're able to do so, if you're playing something like a barbarian and you can reduce damage that's coming in, you might find you can hold the line for quite a while the rest are doing their job, hopefully decimating the enemy from range. Okay. So there's a point to actually doing this, the dash. Usually it's to get in close fast. Dash doesn't work very well when you want to get out of trouble very fast. Although you could use dash to get out of trouble really fast. The only problem is if the fighter decides it's too much to deal with an ogre, and we start our turn here, we might, as our fighter takes their first their turn in the round, might decide, well, actually, I'm going to move and then dash, because if I don't, I'm just going to wind up being in the way and get crushed like a bug. Okay? And you can do that. You can do something like that. But, of course, the ogre will get an attack of opportunity. So they take their attack. If you survive it, you keep going. So I take my move, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And then I want to use my action and move again. Otherwise, the ogre's just going to catch up to me and hit me again. And I don't want that to happen. So I go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And then I'm going to start trying to jump over the gap. Okay? And I tell the others, get out of here. This is too much. You're on your own. Or follow me. Time to run away. So getting out of trouble, provided you can survive the first opportunity attack. Okay, so let's start looking at some of these questions here. Paul, this is a great demo. Most of all of its kind of flies in the face of who's saying, I don't always use action to start. Sure, skin a cat. No problems. Thank you, Paul. The dodge tank. Yeah, so dodge is underutilized. Often it's smarter to not disengage but to use the dodge action, which is also an action to use when you're trying to escape, because you've got a better chance of surviving. The only time that disengage really works is when the enemy can't follow you or won't follow you. Okay, so let me just go to the camera just briefly. That doesn't mean I won't come back to the battle mat, but it's just going to be easier for me to read these rather than trying to look at my phone and my eyes are going funny. Yeah, so Noroak, the mechanic that I demonstrated, where we add two ability scores together for a task to be performed, we were trying to get multiple individuals involved, is an old mechanic. It's not part of 5e, but I'm going to encourage you to consider using it because it does make sense, and it does eliminate a lot of the nonsense of rolling dice. One of the things you'll find, say, an old example of this would be lifting the portcullis. Like a portcullis, one person lifting a portcullis doesn't make sense because a portcullis is hugely, it's so heavy. So no matter how strong you are, if you're a medium-sized creature and your strength is like 20, that is really probably not enough to lift a portcullis, realistically, right? We're in a fantasy world, so we don't want to get too caught up in realistic. But it doesn't really make sense. It's just too hard. But if more than one individual was part of the lifting process, then how do we do that? Are we going to all have them roll dice? Because it's not going to make sense. None of them are going to be able to roll high enough. So we're going to add something together. And the easiest way to do that is just take the strength score if you're using strength. Okay, there are other ways of doing a sort of a joint score test, you might say. A lot of the time, if you looked at old adventures, when you had to lift the portcullis, they would say the combined strength score of whoever's involved has to be 40 or 50. And so that meant that most of the party had to be involved to actually get the portcullis to go up. Otherwise, it didn't move. Okay. How important are the marching orders to a party's ability to successfully harness things like flanking? Look, my advice to you, and let me demonstrate flanking, Paul, because I think a lot of people, particularly players, think that flanking's a really good idea, and actually flanking's great for a dungeon master, not for a player. So let me demonstrate this. Flanking. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to a different screen. Yeah, bending bars is another good example of like how practical is it to do that. Let me just show you the problem with flanking. It's great to get advantage on attack rolls. Granted, absolutely agree. We definitely want that if we can get it. But here's the problem. Most of the time, the Dungeon Master has more enemies than the player characters have characters. So if we take this situation, we have a whole bunch of goblins and we've got an ogre. Yep, and we have the party. First off, whoever moves first and crosses that distance, that makes a big difference in terms of positioning, correct? But let's assume that the party are able to form up a decent line of defense. Decent line of defense. We can eliminate these monsters from the table. We can eliminate them from the table if you want. Okay? We can say, no, they're not there if you like. Okay? But I will just shift all those things out of the way so you can't see them. So our goblins and our group are now positioning themselves. They've tried to be as defensive as possible. So here is our problem, people. Here's just with goblins. Often with goblins you have more than one goblin in the fight, don't you? Don't you? Yeah, you do. So here's the problem. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 goblins and an ogre. Now if I had more goblins, maybe the fight would be easier. Yeah, absolutely. But often the players will find themselves, and this is almost always the case when you're running any kind of combat, and that is the Dungeon Master generally has more monsters than the player characters. So unless the player characters can diminish them very quickly in the first round before they get to act, which there's no guarantee they can do, they wind up in the situation where they're outnumbered. And then suddenly flanking is actually not to their advantage because the monsters can do that as well. Do you know what I mean? What is to stop these monsters changing their position to really make things difficult? Goblins have nimble escape. That means they can use a bonus action to disengage. Can they not? Disengage is a bonus action. Disengage and hide, which is rough, is a bonus action. That means that if these goblins decide to do that, 5, 10, so disengage and move, they can move around. Now they've got flanking with the ogre. Disengage and move. Flanking with the ogre, and has the choice to attack the wizard as well. Do you know what I mean? This one here decides, no, I don't want to be here. I want to change position completely. I can move round here and go after the wizard. Disengage as a bonus action and move 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I'm now flanking with the goblin here, and the wizard is now in real big trouble. It's going to be much more to the advantage of the Dungeon Master. So this is why when we start talking about using flanking as a variant rule at my table, I always tell the players, are you sure you want to do that? Because as a general rule, I will probably have more monsters at the table that you're fighting. I will probably have greater numbers than you have player characters. And they start thinking about this and they start to realize it's probably not a good idea. And just this scenario here in itself demonstrates that. With something as simple as goblins who can suddenly move their position and change, flanking is to a goblin's advantage, far more than the player characters, unfortunately. Okay, so that's just my view of flanking in the game, and utilizing it. It's not always a great idea. Mobile is a good feat, absolutely. So let me just see if I can go back to the flanking section. Now, Paul, watching it play out, like, helped me wrap my brain around it. Okay, so good. I'm glad it was able to help out in some way. I don't know which part that was because I'm a bit behind. Beginner videos, everyone has unique insights and knowledge to share. Yes, look, beginner videos are one of those things which, I mean, I've made all those. Do you know what I mean? I've made plenty of videos that demonstrate all the basics of the game. And my first presentation was all about just the basics of the game, right? So all I do is explain, but I mean, I could demonstrate all that stuff as well, but I've already done videos like that. They're like 3-4 minutes. They do exist, so I don't need to do that again. What I need to do now is help you as a Dungeon Master and as players understand how you're going to engage with the rules to make it work for you, and so it makes sense, particularly for Dungeon Masters who are still trying to wrap their head around all this stuff. Paul, I once played with Rogue Roman. Patient defense, uncanny dodge, yes. Yeah. So if you combined a rogue who has uncanny dodge, and they're using the dodge action and patient defense, yes, it would be very hard to get to them. Absolutely. Yes, bending bars is another good example, Samuel. Absolutely. If you find like they want to do something that seems physically impossible to achieve without like additional assistance, then okay, yeah. Feats. We're not going to talk about feats. That's exactly what tends to happen too, yes. You can get caught between enemies. I just demonstrated that. No, kobolds have pack tactics. You won't find kobolds engaging in melee combat unless you want your kobolds to die. They will set traps. The only thing you'll see of a kobold is it's basically their traps and then the carnage that takes place as you have to dissect yourself from them. No, kobolds have the pack tactics. It's the goblins that have nimble escape, which still makes them very, very dangerous. Polearm, yeah, okay, alright, da-da-da. Papa Knight, hello. I'm using flanking from 3.x, okay. Brian Murray, hello Brian Murray. Brian, it's going alright. Brian, I think I was looking at something today. What was it? I can't remember exactly what it was. There was something that was going through my mind. You have recently joined, I believe it's recently that you have joined Patreon, correct? You jumped onto Patreon. Yeah, that's right. Now I see it. Welcome to Patreon. I hope you are finding the resources on Patreon useful. So Papa Knight, if I got your name right, I'm glad that you are finding this useful. We're actually going to cover a couple other things too. Something that probably needs to be covered. Oh, sorry, I am. Okay, I'm playing in my weekly Wednesday night game in 40 minutes. Oh, you're going to get going very shortly. Rogue Assassin. Okay, all right. Time for the Goblin Kobold crossbreed. Yeah, you could do a crossbreed reader for sure. Okay, Charles Butler. Charles Butler. Do I recognise the name, Charles? Is it because I've been talking to you a whole lot, or is it something else? I can't remember what it is. Have we been talking in the comments section? I think it has. I know I've seen you around before. For the life of me, it's been a struggle trying to keep up with everybody and remember all the names. Charles Butler. It does ring a bell. Your name rings a bell. Absolutely. Okay, so what I want to do before everybody needs to go and get on with their life, I want to show you one of the biggest problems with advantage and disadvantage. And then I will do some rolling initiative. So for those of you who need to see how initiative is done, that's fine, we'll do that. But I want to show you the problems with advantage and disadvantage. Okay. Let me just switch over my camera back to here. And so we've just been chatting in the comments section, haven't we, Charles? I'm pretty sure that's the case. Right, so problem. Now, I'm doing this because some of you will probably have come across this already. Advantage. Disadvantage. A mechanic that actually gets used quite a lot now, does it not? It comes up quite a bit. Advantage, yes, heaps. Disadvantage, a lot less. Absolutely, I agree. So here is one of the biggest problems with something like this. So I'm going to sort of just put things back and leave things where they were. But I want to demonstrate some of the hassles involved in dealing with that. And let's go there. Let's put our little goblins out of the way for now. And we'll put those two there. Another good way to deal with creating a front line too, by the way, if you are unsure, is to actually use two people with a space in between. Yes, monsters can go between, but it does actually allow you to spread them out a little bit. It means that you at least probably wind up with two individuals getting through, okay? But as long as whoever's in the back line is far enough away, they won't get attacked. Yep, you just make sure your back line moves further back. And they can still hold them at bay, okay? This is another way of holding your front line if you needed to do so. So problems with advantage and disadvantage. So here's our first problem. Whatever feature you have, say you roll a single dice. I roll a single dice. But then there's a feature that I can use in the game. There are lots of different features in the game that you can use. And with this, I can apply advantage. Say, let's, for example, in the circumstance, I have advantage. The fighter gets advantage. Why is that? Possibly because the cleric applies advantage. So that's easy. I can just roll this dice and say, I want to apply advantage so that the fighter on the next turn gets advantage. That's pretty easy. Maybe I have a special ability that allows me to apply advantage because I have inspiration. Inspiration's a really good example of like, I rolled that, I did my calculation, and it wasn't enough for whatever reason. Maybe I roll like a 2 on the 20-sided dice. And like, no, that's not enough. What do we do? Well, hang on, I got inspiration. We can make it a better roll. And I roll a 5. Okay, so that's a better roll. Not a great roll, but it's a better roll. When you roll one dice and you have advantage, there's no real problem. If you are having something that you apply after. Yep. If I roll a single dice, and then somebody says, you have disadvantage because of you're actually blind. You know, you've been blinded by some effect. Somebody has been casting a spell and there's some sort of buzzy things hanging around you. Well, that's fine. I've rolled one dice. So I rolled disadvantage. So I roll another dice. And the two dice, I compare them. I rolled a 4 and 11. Fine. So I take the lowest result for disadvantage. So when you roll one dice and then you have to apply advantage and disadvantage, it's not a problem. When there's multiple cases of advantage, you don't need to worry about rolling additional dice. You can only apply it once. When you have disadvantage, you can only apply it once. Here's one problem that can crop up that really buggers things up. Imagine you have disadvantage for whatever reason. You've been blinded or some sort of spell of effect, and you make your attack with disadvantage and you're the fighter. I just made my okay, I got a critical and I got a 7. Suck. That sucks. Doesn't it suck? Doesn't it suck? Doesn't that suck? Really? Did I get that? And then the discussion goes around, well, hang on, if I've got the lucky feat, can I just get rid of that disadvantage by having advantage? So when should I apply it? Look, there's lots of rules and discussions around this, but this I just wanted to point out the major problem with advantage and disadvantage and how it's applied. If I decide, okay, well, no, you really needed to state that you had advantage before you did the dice roll so that we didn't roll 2 dice, because it would have been a flat roll, and we can't. Which dice do we take away? If we're now applying inspiration, for example, on disadvantage, do I take away the 20 or do I take away the 7? Which one do I take away? How are you going to roll it? How is it going to work? Are the rules going to support it? There are many occasions where the application of advantage and disadvantage occur after dice have rolled, if you have not noticed. This happens quite a lot, and it causes untold stress for players and for dungeon masters because it poo-poos on everything. And the reason why it poo-poos on everything is because it's metagaming involved. And when you do that and you don't have a set time when you apply advantage and disadvantage, everything just goes out the window. All right? So I had disadvantage, but I want to apply advantage in this situation, and suddenly I don't know which dice I'm supposed to take away. What if I have advantage? I have advantage and I got a 10 and I got a 12. Okay, and then somebody says, oh, hang on, my spell casting goblin is going to cast a reaction spell and you're going to have disadvantage because they cast something like, I don't know, they readied an action for vicious mockery or something that applies disadvantage. Well, hang on, I've already rolled with advantage, now I've got disadvantage, now it's a flat roll, I should only be rolling 1 dice, but I've already rolled the dice. Are we going to do it? Are we going to deal with it after? Are we going to deal with it after? So what do I do now? Like, which dice do I take away? This is one of the biggest problems that the designers of the game have created for you as players and dungeon masters. Can I just say right now, when it comes to advantage and disadvantage, I think probably the easiest way to solve this problem with regard to I've already rolled the dice and the advantage or disadvantage is applied after the dice rolling, and it's not a re-roll of dice. When you're re-rolling dice, that's not such much of a problem. The problem with re-rolling dice is sometimes it looks so much like advantage, people kind of assume that it is, okay, and get confused. My suggestion to you is when you have to deal with advantage and disadvantage, it's probably smart to say, if you're going to apply advantage or disadvantage with whatever ability you have or whatever feature you have to do it before the dice are rolled. That's why a lot of people do this. A lot of dungeon masters just say, no, it doesn't happen. No, you can't apply disadvantage or advantage after the dice have been rolled. You have to make sure that takes place before that. Now, there are some features that don't work like that and actually would be quite difficult to roll like that. They require you to do a lot of fiddling around. There's another alternative to deal with, I've already rolled the dice, but now I have to apply disadvantage or advantage to the dice roll, and it's going to change how many dice are there. I mean, if I've got disadvantage and somebody says, oh, you've got disadvantage on this roll, well, I've already got disadvantage, no problems. What's another solution? Either we make sure we apply advantage and disadvantage before dice are rolled, or you tell the player or the dungeon master decides which dice is removed. I think that's the only way to solve your arguments at the table about how advantage and disadvantage works. So if you've already rolled with disadvantage and somebody says, I want to use advantage, my inspiration, and apply advantage to that roll. After the roll is made, I don't want them to get the 10. And so the dungeon master says, well, we've already rolled 2 dice, but you want to apply advantage to this instead. I think the easiest way is either have the players pick which dice is going to be appropriate and remove it, and you keep the one that you want, or the Dungeon Master decides which dice is removed and you keep that. Does that make sense? I think that is the easiest way to deal with this, because when you've already rolled the dice, it's kind of already done. Do you know what I mean? My preference to dealing with something like this when it does happen and you get disadvantage and you roll on the dice, okay, is just to simply say, okay, I had disadvantage, I want to apply advantage here. I'm just going to take away that dice. That dice doesn't exist. We'll just take the higher number. We'll just take the higher number. It was supposed to be a disadvantage, but now it's advantage. So there's only one dice involved. This dice doesn't exist anymore. Bye-bye. Throw it away. Yep. And the same applies if you've got something like you've rolled 2 dice and somebody's applied, you had advantage. It should have been a standard roll because somebody decides to apply disadvantage after. I want disadvantage on that roll rather than advantage. I would just say remove the higher number, keep the lowest number. There's only one dice involved and you keep the low number. That is probably the easiest way to contend with all of the arguments you will have with regard to when and how you apply advantage and disadvantage to your game, because it will come up a lot. Okay. Do I use the help action often, or do you find player don't take advantage of it because of L flyby? True strike. True strike is very situational, people. You're probably going to find very few situations where true strike will actually be your go-to. It's actually hard to pull off. True strike is when you're dealing with really high armor class and you've got plenty of time to set up. Otherwise, you probably don't want to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here now is I am going to eliminate a few of the different things here, and I'm going to move him back here. We're going to just assume he's not in the picture for now. Okay, sorry, Ogre. You're too complicated. So we get into a fight. There's a fight going to take place between these goblins. I'll get rid of those guys as well. And we'll get rid of this. Move them out of the way so you can't see them. Okay, so we're just dealing with goblins, 5 goblins, and our player characters. And it's time to roll initiative. I said I would do some initiative, so let's deal with that, shall we? Here's my little panel, and we have the fighter, wizard, rogue, cleric, and the DM. It's really important for those of you who are new to the game that when you decide to get them to roll initiative, that you give them a good trigger. Give them something that they really will understand why there's actually going to be a fight. It is actually really important. I know this has cropped up in my game at times. So guys, you're not in here. Just back off. Okay, so when you set up your battle, make sure there is something that happens that is offensive or assaulting or definitely is forcing there to be a fight, an actual combat. Otherwise, if you just say, you see some goblins ahead of you, roll initiative. And you're like, well, why am I rolling initiative? I'm rolling initiative because the goblins are pulling back arrows and about to shoot arrows at me. And they're rushing towards me and they're yelling something in goblin that sounds like kill them. That makes sense. But if I just see goblins, why do I need to roll initiative? So give them something that signals that there should be a fight. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it doesn't help in the slightest, unfortunately. So let us have a look at how initiative is determined. Set the scene and go through the process of rolling initiative. Now what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to actually use the initiative that I've already predetermined for these. All of these characters are level 1. They are the pre-made characters from the Dungeons and Dragons 5e starter set. And what I'm basically trying to do here is make it fairly standardized, okay, in terms of figuring it out and then laying it out for you. All right. Now, first one, we'll do with a wizard. Their modifier is a 2. That's their dexterity modifier. We roll a 20-sided dice, not with advantage. Take one of those dice away. So our wizard, what do they get? We roll a 10-sided dice, we add our dexterity modifier or initiative modifier, and that's a 10. So we get a 12. So 12 for our wizard. We'll write that up there. When you're doing this in your own game, can I advise you, get one of your players to do this for you, so you don't have to think about this. This can take a long time. Now, one of you in the chat said they do this only once at the very beginning, and they use the same initiative every single time. I do the same thing, and what I also do is the only thing I really re-roll is the DM. The monster's the only ones who re-roll. So this time I'll do the fighter. They get a -1, okay? And I believe the fighter might also have a rather hefty penalty because they are in heavy armor, if I remember right. I can't remember if they do, but let me just have a look very quickly. Great Axe, fighter, initiative. No, that's for stealth. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're just rolling straight. Okay, 11. So 11 and 1 -1, so that's 10. So our fighter gets a 10. There's no surprise because it's right out in the open. I'm going to do the same thing for the cleric, who has a -1 as well. Roll your dice, cleric. You get a 12. And -1 is 11. So that's a cleric. And then our last one, get rid of this. This is going to be our rogue, who has a 3 for their initiative or dexterity. Roll 20-sided dice. Got a 17. And 3 is 20. Rogue 20. Now, I've got a roll for our monsters. My goblins. Now, don't roll for every single goblin. There are 5 goblins, 5 different rolls. I know some people like to do this. Don't do it. It's a pain in the butt to navigate through. It takes forever. Unless you have software that does this for you automatically, it's generally going to waste your time. I wouldn't advise it. So our goblin has a dexterity modifier of +2. If you can't find the initiative on the stat block for the goblin, it's because it's always the dexterity modifier. They don't ever list the actual initiative itself. So it's a 2. And I roll 20-sided dice for all the goblins. All the goblins will go at the same time. I got an 8. Comes to 10. And I'm really glad to see that we got a tie here, because that's actually a good time to demonstrate some stuff. Right, so first off, 20. Who got 20? The highest number is 20. That's the rogue. So we move everybody down, grab the rogue, put them at the top. Highest number at the top. Next one is a 12. That's the wizard. So they're the next person in order. Next one is an 11. That's the cleric. Put the cleric. We have a tie between the fighter and the DM because they're both on 10. What do you do with a tie? Now, in previous versions of the game, if you had a character or a monster with a larger dexterity modifier, you would say, okay, whoever has the highest dexterity modifier gets to go first with a tie. But that's old versions of the game. That doesn't actually apply to 5e now. Or, in the past, what we would do is we get the DM and the fighter to roll a 20-sided dice, and whoever rolled the higher number was the one who would go. Okay? And like, okay, grab a 20-sided dice each. We're going to have a roll off to see who gets the highest number, and that's how we would determine it. We don't do that either. You can use either of those older versions of how to determine a tie between the DM and the player characters. But in the current version of Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeon Master decides how it works. So you can use any of those two suggestions I've given you in terms of resolving a tie between the DM and the player characters, or you can decide that your monster go first. And so that's what I would do. This is my normal process. You don't have to do it this way, people. You do it the way that you like, because the rules around how to resolve a tie between the Dungeon Master and the players is basically the DM decides how that works. That's really what it says in the player's handbook. If you look closely, that's exactly what it says. So I do this. Now, why do I do this? Because most of your fights take 1 or 3 rounds. You need to give your monsters enough time to do stuff. Otherwise, they are going to be a pushover, and there's nothing really for them to do. And that's all over. And so we go back to doing something else. I have had a bathroom break, Dinomancer. Hello, Dinomancer. Dinomancer is also a patron. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Okay, so I have shown you how it all works. I'm not going to go through a battle because I am so hot right now, and I'm ready to pass it out. I'm literally on the edge of like melting in my office. It's so hot right now. So I'm going to apologize for anybody who wanted it more. That's probably not going to happen. Dungeons and Chronics. So we've got that there. Oh, I need to actually, before we go, I need to refer you to another YouTuber. And actually, what I do need to do is I need to talk about something. So for those of you who are here and don't care about that sort of thing, that's fine. But one of my members of the Dungeon Master Roundtable has passed away. So for those of you who have watched my channel and other channels on YouTube, you know that I organise the Dungeon Master Roundtable. There are many different YouTubers who do roleplay games and Dungeons and Dragons on YouTube, come together and we talk about Dungeons and Dragons stuff, DM stuff, player stuff, monster stuff. I do a lot of monster stuff if I can. And so in the just over a year, I think it's been a year, maybe 2 years now, maybe it's closer to 2 years now, we've had one member who is wound up in the Ukraine war, and he's still alive, thank God. But I had probably one of the first members who helped start it all, Gonzo the Great from Dungeon Class. He passed away. He had cancer. We've known for a while. I knew his time was limited. We were hoping that something better would happen, but he's finally passed away, and I'm sad to see him go. I guess because when me and Wally DM decided the Dungeon Master Roundtable was going to be a thing, I really wanted to have much closer relationships with people who were doing what I was doing. And Dungeon Class, Mark and Gonzo ran that channel. And you will have noticed they haven't put anything up for quite some time because there's been a lot going on. Gonzo was the sort of person, and I feel like I need to pull up their channel. I'm going to do that now. Let me talk to this channel because that's probably going to help put it more in perspective. So just give me a second while I just find them. It's it's a strange experience to have started something, have to know somebody, and then to have lost them. And I can assure you he will be missed. Absolutely. So let's just see if I can find this channel. Properties. Here it is. And, oh, not that. Fred, try not to move the whole thing. Grab my camera and I'll put it up here. That is probably going to be more useful to you. Okay. So this is Dungeon Class. So Mark and Gonzo started this channel a while ago. And I mean, the reality is they're more my age. Do you know what I mean? So we had more in common than anything else. They are the first individuals that me and Wally invited to the Dungeon Master Roundtable. When I think about Gonzo and his contribution to the community, he was such a positive and enthusiastic person. I would say he was what got Mark to do the channel. Mark is now in a position where he has to decide whether he wants to continue. He wants to try to do this. He wants to try to continue the channel with Gonzo's kids, Logan and Ben, I believe. Logan I've met. I don't think I've met Ben. Now you will notice that some of their stuff seems very clickbaity. But they had their heart in the right place. And this is Gonzo here, where you see flippin' sweet, long character backstories. So a different perspective. He was fun to be around. He was a funny guy. He's the sort of person, I would say, if you think about what we get in the community, sometimes we get people who just make Critical Role videos. And everybody does. Let's get real. Every single channel generally, if they're very sort of multi-faceted, will probably try to do that because that seems to be the only thing that anybody watches, and any kind of significant numbers. But he was so open to the idea of working with me and Wally and other people. Do you know how difficult it is to get YouTubers who have in different parts of the world together to actually agree to do this, who don't have like significant conditions for working with you, or have concerns or requirements? The number of requirements I've had to deal with are significant. They were very easy about the whole thing. Now, they were about 1,000 subscribers, maybe a little bit less when I first got to know them. I think they had less than 1,000. They now got 3.26. And of course, there's no more content coming out. And people are wondering, where have they gone? And the reason is because one of the key people who were part of that channel, and now they've passed on. They've moved on to another place. I am glad that he no longer has to worry about the pain he was probably going through. But I wanted to mention Gonzo because he was a good guy. He really was. Anyway, now, if I can find my buddy here, there's a thing called redirect on YouTube where you can redirect somebody else to somebody else's live stream. Now, you guys know that I like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons monsters. I like monster lore. I'm going to be talking about the monsters of the multiverse tomorrow. It will be 2 hours earlier than my normal time, 2 hours earlier than today, basically, when we do it. If I can find him, okayest DM. Can I find okayest DM? Okayest DM. Dennis, where are you, Dennis? Dennis is a new member to the Dungeon Master Roundtable. Let me just see if I can find his live stream. Hopefully YouTube is... There we are. Here it is. So Dennis very shortly is going to be talking about taking old monsters and converting them to 5e. Something that is very much done by Dungeon Dad, who I've had a good relationship with in the past. And he is about to do it very, very shortly. So I thought what I'll do is I'll grab the link to that, copy, and we will flick back over to my face, and I will plonk this into my live feed right here for those of you who would like to go and hang out with him while he tries to build different monsters. Why not? Like, if you've got time, I think this is probably the best way to get you to continue checking on what he's doing. I'm going to end my poll for today. We will be back next week, of course, to talk about more stuff. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the complex combat mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons. So things like the ready to action, grappling, shoving, things like that. All those sorts of nuancy bits and pieces. Today was supposed to be just the basic stuff. Yep. All right. So I need to just make sure I've got my screen set. And no, not that one. This one here. I'm quite deliberate about my selection of images, by the way, people. So I just want to say, gosh, I can't believe I got through this. Gonzo was on my mind so much. Anyway, I want to thank all of my patrons for supporting me on Patreon. I do appreciate it, and thank you very much. You ensure that I can run this class every day and all the other classes that get run on this channel. And I do thank you because you are a big part of that. I want to thank everybody who's been part of the live stream today. If I was not able to call you out and say hi to you and I missed you, I am sorry, but I do appreciate you being part of the discussion. It's just I realized today I needed to make sure I did more demonstration and less talky because we get enough of that on YouTube as it is, and we need more demo instead. So I do apologize if I did not spot your name in the chat today or comment on everything that you said. Thank you for watching the replays of my live streams and my edited videos. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Five Bush Boy, hello there. Don't you worry, it's not going away. Be here for a while yet.